Then there's the success growth phase, which I would call the rocket ship. The phase that either gets to take off and into outer space and really soars, or crashes and burns. Or it might level out into a successful but survival phase. What is the owner doing at this phase? The owner is risking his or her capital, maybe taking enough out to pay taxes in an S-corp or a partnership, and the rest is being reinvested in the business. So many of our clients are also doing that because they want to grow the business to an exit. They want to grow it to such a level that it'll generate a successful sale or acquisition of the business later on. And so there is a significant amount of operational planning as well as strategic planning, and budgets become very important at this phase. Strategic planning is extensive. It involves the owner. The owner still is involved, but now the owner has a second tier of really competent management to be able to take it to the next level. How many of you have worked with clients that had good businesses generating around $1 million or $5 million a year in revenue, but never could take it to the next level? I've got a ton of clients like that. And part of the reason is that the entrepreneur or the client really has a difficult time letting go of things that they should be delegating to others, administrative tasks like the controller function. Marketing, well, they may be good salespeople, but they may not really be good marketers and know how to manage the growth of the business in a way that allows it to remain competitive in the marketplace. And then stage 4 is the takeoff or rocket ship phase. The key problem is how to grow rapidly and how to continue financing the growth. Cash becomes extremely important. It may require outside equity financing or outside equity capital in addition to the traditional sources of equity, because there's going to be great demands on the business to sustain that growth. Adding people. Where am I going to get the cash to pay these people? Well, if I'm generating revenues from my business with profits, I will have the cash. But what if I need more? What if I need something more? At this level of the takeoff phase, the rocket ship phase, the key managers really have to be competent to handle a very much more complex organization that's growing. So you're going to have subject matter experts, people that really understand marketing, really understand sales and sales organizations, who can manage a larger workforce. And at this phase, the organizational structure becomes a lot more complex. Having a flat organizational structure in a big rocket ship that's growing fast is, in my view, a recipe for failure. It won't succeed. You have to have a second tier of management that can allow the owner to continue doing the strategic planning or outward growth development, bringing in clients, bringing in other managers to allow the company to sustain its growth. If the company fails to make the big time at the takeoff phase, it may be able to retrench, cut back, and continue as a successful business. So I've got a very successful retail client, and for years they were growing at the rate of 3 to 4% top line growth a year. And this is, we're talking about $500 million of revenue in this company. So they were growing. And then for some reason in the marketplace, and they're not the only ones suffering this, sales began to plateau and drop off. And it's the nature of their business. I won't go into it. Some of it has to relates to the internet. The owner's facing a conundrum. He's at that phase where he's going to decide to reinvest into the growth of the business, re-engineer it perhaps, and do something a little bit differently, or retrench and just, as he said, milk the business until it's dry. And you can do that because the kids who are involved in the business aren't really involved in the business and don't really have any intent of continuing it beyond the next generation. You could try to sell it, but because the revenues are starting to plateau and tail off and profits have been a challenge, it's not a good time to sell. The best time to sell is when the revenues are going up and the profits are going up, because you're going to attract the highest multiple of earnings. We'll get into that in a minute. So at that phase, the owner's making a decision. Well, he's decided to re-engineer the business, do things a little bit differently. They're taking a huge risk because they brought in an outside consultant who really is the guru in this particular industry to help them re-engineer the business. And if they are successful, it'll redo the way in which this particular type of retail business, it's a services business, operates in the whole marketplace. It'll affect everyone in the marketplace. And it's very exciting to be I'm on the finance committee of this company, and I get to see the inside and inner workings of how they're doing this. And to me, it's exciting as a business person just to watch what they're doing. Will they succeed? You don't know until they try. And so they're rolling this thing out right now. Over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll find out. If it doesn't succeed, then they'll retrench. That's the business plan. But if it does succeed, it'll take them to the next level, maybe enabling them to sell the company or grow it organically even further. And then stage 5 is resource maturity. The company has grown as fast as it can, and now it's gotten to the phase where it's relying heavily on budgets and strategic planning and management by objectives and standard costing and other things. It is just trying to maintain its level of production or its level of profitability. There's a term I love, it's called ossification. It may actually become ossified, like bones becoming set. At this stage, there may be a lack of innovative decision making in the business, or the inability, because of its industry or its stage, to do any more than it can, and it starts to get into a risk avoidance mode. And so it's a really mature business that really doesn't have the opportunity to grow as fast as it had in the past. So understanding these stages, it doesn't just apply from startup to a company that's 30 years later. It might be you might have a 6-month-old company with 20 people that is already in the takeoff phase because of its product or because of its service orientation. It's doing something really unusual. You may have a 30-year-old company that could be in the takeoff phase too. It might have been ambling along, generating nice profits for the owner, and then the owner transitions ownership to a next level of management who has a little bit more innovative thought processes in how to grow the business. They come in, they bring in outside equity capital, and all of a sudden it goes north, or it could go south because of the risks being taken. Halt and catch fire?
Yeah, that's a cool.
No.
It goes right through all these stages.
Yeah.
It does. It's back in the 80s when the tech were just taking off.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I was thinking about that, looking back on that show.
Well, this is nothing new. This has been around. Been around for a long time.
It's unbelievable, really. If you ever saw the show, you'd see what I'm talking about.
I should watch it. It sounds like it'd be great. What is the next level if you're trying to get to the next level? It really depends on your client's, the size, the nature, the maturity of the entity. Just like we were talking about and looking at that 5 levels or 5 stages of business. But it's also, what is the client's landing strategy? What is their exit plan? Again, like we learned in episode 1, you always have to have an exit plan. Always have to have an exit plan. If you don't have an exit plan, you're not doing what Stephen Covey said, and that is begin with the end in mind. What business factors are going to affect you getting to the next level, and what business factors will affect valuation of the business? We don't need to go through all of these, but if you've got an owner that's 75 who owns 75% of the business, and a couple of minority owners that have been working with him for about 20 years who are in their 50s, that's going to affect valuation. It's going to affect the exit strategy for the owner, because the owner may be very tired and ready to leave. But are those 2 minority owners really the ones who are capable of operating the business? This is the biggest challenge I'm seeing with my clients who are at this sort of phase. I've got one guy in particular, he's really been challenged. He's in an industry that really requires a lot of sales force out in the market. And he's been very successful over the last 30 years. And he's ready to quit. He wants to take it to the success disengage phase. He wants to take some money off the table and let the business continue operating and try to incentivize the people who are with him to run the business. But he hasn't been able to find the right people. They're all fighting with each other. They don't know how to run a business. He's been successful at keeping them all together. So he's got to find somebody like him that could step in and convince all these people to stay and continue to remain engaged and generate profits in the business. He may end up winding this whole thing down and taking it, and closing the doors, just because he hasn't been able to find the right person to help run the business. If you've got an owner that's a 50% owner and another one that's a 50% owner, but one is a multimillionaire because he cashed or she cashed out of a prior business, and the other one this is his or her first business, what do? How do you treat them? How do we develop governance standards for this business? And what is the value of the business for the multimillionaire versus the one who's just hasn't taken any equity off the table in any other business? All of these are factors that go into the question of valuation, health and insurability. If I've got an owner that I want to be able to buy out, what happens if they die? Buy-sell agreements. I need to buy life insurance, right? What if they're uninsurable? Or if they're only insurable at really high standard rates and they don't want to pay for this? How do you fund the buy-sell? We'll talk a little bit more about it, but all of these business factors are things that affect, one, when you can take your chips off the table or whether you can do it, and the value of the business.